Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. I am Aaron Hoisington, and as always, I am joined by Ryan Nelson, founder of Alchemy Wealth Management, avid triathlon activity guy, does everything under the sun. If he's down to try it. I would always say that about you, Ryan. Like, you are always willing to try things. I would say you try anything once for the most part. I'd say, like, whether it be food, travel, activity. If you see somebody's like enjoying it, like, you're willing to give it a shot. Is that an accurate representation?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I'd say so as well. I feel like whether or not you're like, that's kind of, most people are like, well, that's kind of weird, or that might be the case, but you're willing to always give it a shot there for sure. And I challenge the listeners out there to give this podcast a go. I mean, we are 30 plus episodes in, so if you're just joining us now, welcome aboard. Feel free. You got lots of content to go and catch up on with, and hopefully it'll bring you some, get you a little bit more fiscally fit here. But we are going to dive in today to the 4% rule. Last episode we did the rule of 72, and definitely go and check that out. Ryan, in finance specifically, or in let's just call it finance. What are rules specifically? I guess I should have asked that. Are rules something that are, there's this saying like, oh, rules are made to be broken, or rules are made to be followed. Like, what would you consider, what are rules, I guess? Yeah,
I don't know. I think it's just, this rule of 72, that's just a tool we use, and it sounds cool if we call it a rule. It's a lot better than just 72.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Today, the 4% rule, it's really, it's certainly not a rule. It's just a nomenclature. It's just the naming of what we call this rule of thumb. Cool. I'd say maybe rule of thumb.
I was just literally thinking about that, and I was like, what exactly is it? And is it more of like a guideline, or just like something that, it sounds cool as far as that goes here? And so, but I think the rule, the 4% rule that we're going to dive into today, is very crucial to have an understanding of it just in general. And so I'm going to turn it over to you. What is it?
Yeah. So the 4% rule, I think widely most people would consider it a distribution strategy. So what that means is, as they reach retirement, they would use the 4% rule, as a tool to figure out how much money they can spend in retirement. I would make an argument, I don't consider the 4% rule a very sound distribution strategy.
Okay.
So I don't think it should be a tool used by retirees to determine how much money they can spend each year. But I do think that is widely what it is considered. If you go Google this, I think that's what you're going to find. To me, it should be used more as a rule of thumb for pre-retirees to get a rough or approximate basis of how much money they might approximately need for retirement. Mm-hmm. So what the 4% rule states, and again, I like it because it's really simple. It's easy math. It's easy for clients to wrap their heads around, right? Planning, oftentimes if we're planning over 30 years, it's not an exact science. We don't know exactly what inflation is going to be over the next 30 years, right? We don't know exactly what market returns are going to be, right? We don't know exactly how your income is going to change. We don't know exactly how your lifestyle is going to change. So we're making these assumptions, right? And so we know whatever numbers we come up with today are going to be slightly off at some point in the future, but we want to be directionally accurate. And so these rules of thumb are sometimes useful because it's really easy for somebody to wrap their brain around and get directionally close. And so, I think it's just a good tool for clients to be familiar with. But so, what the rule of 72 is,
or rule 4% rule.
I'm sorry, 4% rule. Yeah. So what the 4% rule is, it was created by Bill Bengen. He is a financial advisor who is basically trying to figure out, like, how much money can my clients spend in retirement. If they have $100,000, or let's say they have $1 million saved, how much money can they spend every year, right? To make sure they don't run out of money. So what he did, I want to say his background was in math. I think he was a mathematician, but anyways, so what he did was he looked at a 50-year period from 1926 to 1976. So over that 50-year period, and said, if I was invested in 50% stock and 50% bonds, how much money could I take out where I'm not, over any time period? So there was a couple like severe market downturns during that period of time in the 1930s and the 1970s. How much money could I take out where I make sure I don't run out of money? And when he did this analysis, he basically came up with 4%. So he concluded that even with those market downturns in the 30s and 70s, he could take 4% annual withdrawals from his retirement portfolio and be good for any 33-year window. So again, he was analyzing 50 years worth of data. And he said for a 33-year window, you could take 4%, no matter what market downturn, kind of looking at historical data, no matter what market downturns were in this bunch. So that's the basis for this. And so I think it's important to note, like, okay, we're talking about a 50% stock, 50% bond portfolio. Not all clients are invested that way. Some are more aggressive, some are more conservative, right? But also, this was to make sure he didn't run out of money in a 33-year window. So if somebody's retiring at, say, 90, you probably don't need 33 years, right? Yeah. If somebody's retiring at 45, they might need more than 33 years, right? So there's definitely some considerations to take into account with this portfolio, or with this sort of rule of 42. But that's a little bit about the history of it, and sort of how the basis for it. Any questions on that?
Not specifically on that. I'm glad that you kind of detailed where it came from. I didn't know that it had like a kind of an origin with that too. I'm really curious to see how, because when I Googled this before, because I was like, hey, maybe I should be a little bit more prepared when it comes to this here. You hit on it that it normally is used as like a post-retiring tool specifically, but you kind of hit that, like you use it more for like planning for that retire. Like, is that kind of how you use it?
So I personally, as an advisor, don't use it.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it's almost like what I would say is, like, I have access to planning software as I'm working with a client. I would do a far more in-depth analysis than this. Okay, gotcha. But where I think this is valuable is for clients to sort of self-empower themselves. Gotcha. Maybe they don't have access to the same planning tools I have, or maybe they don't want to put the time and energy in to go as deep as I do, but they want to have a ballpark idea. That's where I find this useful. So, for example, like let's just use a quick example here, and let's say that we have a 30-year-old spending $80,000 a year. Okay. So if I was to tell you, okay, imagine a 30-year-old spending $80,000 a year, and they want to retire at 66. Okay. How much money do they need for retirement?
Hard to know.
It's hard to think about that, right? So let's walk through this example. Let's just we can think about this in our heads and use some of these tools to come up with approximations here. So if we say, okay, if somebody wants $80,000, or if somebody is making $80 or spending $80,000 a year now, the question becomes, so like where we kind of start with this is say, okay, is that what you want your retirement lifestyle to look like? And they may say, no, I want to spend a little bit more, like maybe $100,000. Okay, cool. So we have somebody who makes $80,000 now, but they communicate they'd want their retirement, they'd want to be able to live a lifestyle that would require $100,000. Sure. Cool. Well, we know inflation is a real thing, right? And so we say, well, maybe we use the sort of the benchmark for inflation is 2%, right? That's what the Fed targets, is a 2% inflation rate. So if we say, okay, let's assume the benchmark for right now. So if we say, well, let's put the rule of 72 to practice. So the rule of 72, we take 72. If inflation is at 2%, how long will it take inflation to double?
If it's 2%, 36 years.
Yep. So what that means is, at a 2% inflation rate, in 36 years, everything will cost approximately double what it costs now. So if we say, okay, we use the rule of 72 now in practice to figure out sort of how inflation is going to affect us. So we say, okay, we're spending 80,000 now, but we'd really like 100,000, the equivalent of 100,000 in retirement. The reality is, though, if we only have 100,000 50 years or 36 years from now, it's not going to be enough to survive on because of inflation. We think inflation is going to double in about 36 years. Conveniently, that's when we're retiring in this example. So we'd say, okay, we really probably need about 200 grand to live what would today be $100,000 lifestyle, right?
Right.
So now this person can say, okay, we need to make $200,000 annual distributions to be able to live the lifestyle I want in retirement. Now they can practice the rule of 72. So the 4% rule. So now the question would be, how much money would I need in my portfolio to be able to withdraw 4% a year? So you could say, okay, if you think about the math, the way that works out is you just multiply it by 25.
Right.
So 4%, 1/25 is 4%. So if you start with $200,000, you say, I need to take out $200,000 a year. You could multiply that by 25 and you would get $5 million. So you can say, okay, if I had $5 million in retirement, multiply it by the 4% rule, that means I could take out 200 grand a year.
Yeah.
200 grand a year is like the equivalent of 100 grand a year now. And that's a little bit more than what I'm making now. So I could, that would kind of put me on track to hit my retirement goal. So now it empowers this person to know, hey, I need about $5 million for my retirement goal. And what I would tell you is most people would have no idea. If you just initially tell them, hey, how much money do you need? You're 30 years old, you're making 80,000 now a year now. How much money do you need at 66? They would be like, I don't know, 20 million, 5 million, 1 million.
Sure.
$1 million sounds like a lot. 500,000? I don't know. Right. So this at least empowers them with the information to like some basic math where they could do this themselves and say, okay, $5 million. Is that exactly right? Absolutely not. That's not taking into account things like Social Security. That's not, it's making a lot of broad-based assumptions that are probably not 100% accurate. So again, that's why, to answer your earlier question, that's why I don't personally use this with my clients, but I do think it's important for clients to know it so they can be self-empowered, right? So now you could know, okay, this individual would need approximately $5 million for their retirement. But then they could even take it a step further and say they could just use like a future value calculator. It'd probably be easiest to go like online or something to do this. And they could say, okay, how much money, like I have a future value calculator on my phone. And you could say, okay, how much money would I need to save to have, to have $5 million 10 years from now. And so when I plug this into my future value calculator, if I start with $10,000, I get 7% rate of returns. We talked about that last episode. And you have 36 years to save, you'd have $5 million if you save $2,510 a month. So now this individual, this 30-year-old would know, okay, if I want to be able to live a $100,000 lifestyle, I have $10,000 saved in my retirement now, I need to start contributing $2,510 a month to hit this retirement goal. Now they can start to determine, is this goal realistic? Maybe they need to retire later and save more than 36 years, or maybe they need to start adjusting and say, I really need to start saving. I'm spending too much money right now.
Right.
I need to reel this in. I didn't realize how expensive retirement was going to be. Right?
Yeah.
But what I think this is also valuable for is imagine being empowered with these numbers. So knowing, okay, I need to save about $2,500 a month and I need to get to about $5 million. And then imagine you go talk to somebody and they tell you, hey, Aaron, I want to sell you this product. It's this guaranteed insurance product, fast acting retirement plan, ABC, right? And they say, if you just save $500 a month in this plan for the next 20 years, you'll be able to retire. If you'd done all this math yourself and you're saying, well, I need $2,500 a month for 36 years, when this person comes to you and starts selling you this product, you're not just like, you're more self-empowered. You can say, oh yeah, that doesn't align with what I think is the reality.
Yeah.
Right. And you can start questioning and pushing back. Why you see so many people get like taken advantage of in the financial services industry is there's just this level of complete ignorance where it's like when somebody tells you something, what else do you do except take them at their word because you don't know. Right. And so I think things like this 4% rule, again, just empower. It's not a accurate enough tool for me to use in my practice, but it's a great tool for clients to use to empower themselves where they can have a great kind of a rule of thumb of, okay, I need about $5 million, which means I need to save about $2,500 for this hypothetical example. And then again, as they're going out in the world and talking to people, if somebody's trying to sell them a product that sounds too good to be true, It probably is.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's wild. It's so funny that you mentioned that too, because I didn't even equate the two. If it's just like, honestly, just like being more self-aware of that kind of thing. Literally, I was driving over here to do this podcast, and it was an ad on the radio that said, "Hey, retire in half the time with half the money." And it was like this seminar that that you go to, and it was like this proven financial strategy to do this with half the time, half the money. And I was like, that sounds pretty cool. But
sure.
In my mind, I'm like, that probably is not real. And I don't know. I didn't dig into it, obviously, but just if somebody comes to you, because like you said, a lot of people don't know this stuff. You don't know what you don't know.
Yep, exactly.
And somebody comes in and you're like, maybe I should start managing my finances or have someone managing my finances. No matter how old you are at that point, that's probably not your job. You're not spending 8 hours a day. You maybe don't have a degree in that specifically. So you go to a firm, whatever it might be, or a financial planner or somebody, and hey, I want to do that. And they're like, well, yeah, we can get you there in 20 years. You're like, well, I'm 33.
Right.
That goes against everything that it just with the 4% rule, just to be able to think okay, what is it? What am I going to have to sacrifice, or what am I going to have to trade off as far as that goes?
Yeah, and so things like this rule just help you educate yourself, and so you can know kind of what smells like maybe BS, what smells right. Like when somebody's talking to you, okay, does that pass the smell test? Does that sound like that's reasonable or completely unreasonable? Right. So I think that's super empowering. The other thing I think is really empowering is it's in that same sort of vein of ignorance where, you might have this same let's keep using the same 30-year-old example. He might be saving $1,000 a month into his retirement. That's a good chunk of change. Yeah. Right? That's a healthy amount saving. And so he's saving $1,000 a month into his retirement. He's making good money. He has some extra cash. He feels like he's doing good for his retirement. So he maybe sees the new fancy car. It's a $700 payment. And he says, honestly, I can afford this.
Sure.
I'm putting $1,000 into my retirement already. I'm doing well. I'm doing everything I need to be doing. I have an extra $700. Let's buy this new fancy car. And they might truly think they're doing they're right on. They may believe they're on track for their retirement, right? Everything. What this allows them to do is if they go through this 4% rule and they figure out, okay, I need $5 million and I need to be saving $2,500 a month. Now they can look at this and they actually are more empowered as they're making these decisions. So they can say, well, I should actually now be saving $2,500. I'm only saving $1,000. Now, as they're evaluating this car purchase, it doesn't feel like it's just I have an extra $700 a month burning a hole in my pocket. It's actually a trade-off. Well, I'm not saving enough to retire at age 66. Do I care? The answer could be yes or no. They could say, I'm fine pushing my retirement out and I want to buy this car. Perfectly reasonable if that's what aligns with their values. Or they may say, no, I really want to focus on getting to my retirement. I was only looking at a car because I thought I had this extra money. Turns out I actually don't have as much extra money as I think. Let me put this $700 towards my retirement. Now I'm putting $700 towards my retirement. I really need to be putting $2,500. I'm still a little bit short, but next pay raise I get, I'm not going to increase the quality of my life. I'm going to focus that towards extra retirement, or when I get my bonus in, March, I'm going to put that all towards my retirement, right? So again, just helps educate people. I think so many people, they're spending money in ways that don't align with their retirement goals, but not intentionally, just because they weren't aware of what it actually took to reach their retirement goals. And so I think these types of tools are really cool where it's super easy. Any listener could do this in the next 15 minutes. Just follow the steps we just took and have a decent ballpark. Is it going to be as exact as if they go hire a financial advisor and take into account all the considerations that should be taken into account? No, but at least it starts putting them in the right track, right? So again, to me, the 4% rule is less of a distribution strategy. I think there's far better distribution strategies that are more complex than it. So I don't know that I would ever trust it for myself as a distribution strategy.
Right.
But it is a cool rule of thumb to sort of conceptualize how much money approximately how much you might need, and then you could start back calculating maybe how much you'd need to be saving per month.
Yep. No, that's awesome, man. That's a great way to kind of paint that picture as far as, increasing your, becoming more fiscally fit, at least like getting dipping your toe in that water of being like, okay, this is something that I can do it. And it's an easy step. It's a digestible step. it's easy math for the most part that most
Yep.
people can do with, the basic calculator.
Yep,
And be able to at least kind of get an idea to where you go into things and you're like, oh, wow, okay, maybe I shouldn't buy that car. Or,
Right.
What is that going to, how's that going to impact me?
Or what's the trade-off?
Or what's the trade-off? Exactly. So, awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate it, Ryan, here. We'll go ahead and take a quick pause here, and we'll be back on the other side of this. So, everybody hang tight.
And now, to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back, everybody, to this side of the fiscal physical. This is the personal section here, and this question is for Mr. Ryan Nelson, and something that I feel like as whatever your field might be or wherever you're at in life, it's staying motivated, staying engaged with that here. And so I'm curious, Ryan, in your field as a financial advisor with Alchemy Wealth, or the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management, how do you stay motivated and engaged in your field? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a great answer. I mean, I think that I am have some sort of intrinsic motivation or passion about the industry. Why? I have no idea, but I do. So I know I've used in a previous podcast, I can't remember which one, but kind of the example where they say like if you enjoy what you should do, you never work a day in your life, right?
Yeah.
But the example I always like to give is when you meet a doctor at the party, you go up to them, you're like, you find out they're a doctor, and you're like, oh, my elbow's been hurting me. Sure. Can you help? And
I got this mole.
Yeah. And so again, I always say, or I see occasionally like somebody will come up to me at a party and be like, oh, what do you do? I do personal finance, and they say, oh, what should I do with this old 401k, or what do you think about blah blah blah, and and then they're always like, oh no, I don't want to be bothering you at a party, this is what you do all day every day, right? And I'm always like, no, that's what, like, I'd be happy to talk about that at a party. I wish everybody else here wanted to talk about this too, right?
That's why we're here.
Yeah. And so I think I'm just fortunate that I enjoy what I do. I enjoy personal finance. So I don't know why I enjoy it, honestly, quite frankly. I don't know why I have that like sort of intrinsic motivation. I don't do anything in particular to stay motivated. I just like what I do. So it makes it really easy. So I continue to I do continuing education, and I enjoy it. I do listen to podcasts about finance. I enjoy it. I read books and I enjoy it. I don't actually have to take any steps to like stay motivated. Cool. It just is. I enjoy it, so it makes it easy. Yeah. What about yourself?
No, it's an interesting question, and that's awesome that you have that kind of mentality, because it's one of the things like, hey, if you enjoy what you do, like it's a lot. I don't say that people that's saying about like you don't work a day in your life. I don't really subscribe to that. I was like, you're still working, like no matter like unless you're just find some niche, or you're still having to work hard and do these certain things. But for myself, it's kind of just in my field. I'm at this point when we're filming this podcast here, I work in the custom apparel business, and I kind of have to. I find myself having to do new things, take on new tasks, do new new responsibilities, learn new things specifically to kind of stay motivated. So it's like, hey, once I'm doing the same thing over and over again, once I master that craft specifically, I'm like, okay, cool. What's the next thing that I do? Yeah. Is it do I take on a different leadership role? Do I find a new training to help my team out, or whatever it might be? And so I think it's like just staying in, for me, it's like not getting in a rut.
Yeah.
Like I can apply that with, relationships, or with just in life in general, is like staying excited and staying like motivated to do a good job. Like, I don't really have like a secret to it, because I don't know as though there is one, but it's like finding your personal passion that kind of keeps you going in whatever you might be doing. And also I think it's a different, you switch it around, is also finding out when you don't want to do that anymore, and being like, you know what, I'm not happy doing this. I need to do something else that's going to bring me more joy too. So kind of a long-winded way of saying like, I don't know, just kind of feel it. Do what makes you happy. If you're able to do that and it's able to financially support what your goals are, like, more power to you, whatever that might be.
Absolutely, 100% agree.
So awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it, Ryan. This has been great. We're going to go ahead and wrap this one up here. Reminder to all the listeners here: if you guys want your question featured on this, please send us an email at podcast@alchemywealth.com, or just text Ryan, myself, or whatever it might be. Send us a voice clip of your question. We'd be happy to discuss it on the air here. And once again, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it. And Ryan, I'll let you have the final word here.
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening, and as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode, and consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.